Jorge Luis Borges. The Aleph. The Infinite Multiplicity of the Universe. With excerpts of the translation by Norman Thomas Di Giovanni in collaboration with Borges, MIT. A look into a paradigmatic short story by Jorge Luis Borges. Many literary critics consider this story one of the best fiction works in the whole 20th century. By Fernando Chelle. The text chosen for analysis in this literary article belongs to Argentinian writer Jorge Luis Borges, Buenos Aires, Argentina, August 24, 1899, Ginebra, Switzerland, June 14, 1986. It is a short story named El Aleph, the Aleph, considered one of the best fiction works in the 20th century by a part of the whole world's literary critics. The story was first published in the Revista Sir magazine, in the year of 1945, and was later part of a homonymous book published by Editorial Emis in Buenos Aires in 1949. This paradigmatic short story is the final one in a book that contains 17 stories, each one of them, in their own way, are about a particular set of things, about some catalogue, and every story has the most recurrent topics of the Argentinian writer: time, death, the search for knowledge linked with curiosity, Kabbalah, labyrinths, libraries, references to different universally canonic literary works, the inability of mankind to face the eternity, the universe, gods, luck. The story takes the name of the mathematic symbol, Aleph number, the number that symbolizes the size of infinite sets, and represents the infiniteness of the universe, according to the Kabbalistic mystical doctrines. Mystical Jews see the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet as the spiritual root of all the letters, a letter that contains all the others, thus containing all the elements of the human language. According to this tradition, the letter, Aleph, is a symbol of the universe and God's will, as it was the only letter that mortals heard directly from the voice of God. This book, where tradition and metaphysics converge, is written in a sober, understandable way, despite its deep prose. It has the virtue of approaching very complex topics in simple plots, which can be seen clearly in this story. Even if it recreates a transcendental experience, the narration is simple, linear. The story is narrated in first person by a narrator protagonist, who has the same last name of the author. This is nothing but a game played by the author that helps to blur the parameters that separate reality and fiction, added to other elements with a believable nature that recreate a recognizable reality. The main plot is the protagonist facing the infinite, represented in an object called the Aleph, which is nothing but a point in the universe, microcosmos, which contains all the points of the universe. Borges' writer has used a procedure that consists in locating an object of symbolic characteristics in a real, daily life environment, a basement in the city of Buenos Aires. Fantasy is characterized in the inclusion of a supernatural object on a daily life environment. In the case of this story, there are totally realistic features anchored in a perfectly believable and recognizable reality. There, not only the city of Buenos Aires can be found, the neighborhood constitution is present too, as well as the names of writers like Juan Crisostomo Lafina and Pedro Enriquez Ureña, among other references of the real world. This allows Borges to play with a believable reality, turn it into a fiction, and then go deep into another fantastic dimension where the Aleph can be found. While describing the multiplicity of the things in the universe seen in the Aleph, narrator faces the impossibility of doing it effectively, using such a limited resource as language. That is the reason behind the use of chaotic numerations that somehow try to express an unending succession. But even if this is the main topic of the story, there are other two topics that also take part of the narrative axis. Those are the frustrated love between Borges' protagonist and late Beatriz Viterbo, on the other hand, the personal relationship between Borges' protagonist with Beatriz's cousin, Carlos Argentino Darneri. The story can be divided in three stages: first, the happenings in the life of the protagonist before the contemplation of the Aleph, then the beholding of the object, and finally, the reflections of the protagonist on the contemplation of the wonderful element. After two brief quotes, one from Shakespeare and another from Leviathan, the short story starts telling about the death of Beatriz Viterbo, a friend to the protagonist narrator. The first part of the story tells the happenings on Borges' protagonist before beholding the Aleph and how he became a frequent visitor of the house of his dead friend. In that place he meets Beatriz's father, and mainly her cousin, Carlos Argentino Darneri, author of a poem called La Tierra, the Earth, in which he tries to express the roundness of the planet. Borges, the character, has extensive talks with Darneri, something that Borges writer uses to express his points of view on different concepts about literature. Borges writer has created a satirical character, Darnary, who personifies the image of a pseudo-poet awarded with international prizes. It is undoubtedly an implicit critic towards bad literature from Borges' author. The paragraphs written by Beatrice's cousin, considered valuable by their author, nothing but clumsy, extravagant versifications. In one occasion, Darnary phone calls Borges to invite him to drink milk in a bar, property of Zunino and Zungri, the owners of the house in Garay Street where he had traditionally lived. There, Darnary reads some lines of his poems for Borges, who is afraid that the author will ask him to write the prologue for his book, something that won't happen, because Darnary's true intention for Borges is that he works as an intermediary between him and Alvaro Milian Lafina, so it is this last mentioned person the one who will be tasked to prologue the book. At first, Borges accepts to be the intermediary and talk to Lafina, but once he leaves Carlos Argentino, Darnary thinks about it and decides not to do it, and take responsibility for his own decision. Some months later, Borges receives another phone call by Darnary, who in desperation, tells him that Zunino and Zungri are planning to demolish the house in Garay Street where, Darnary confesses Borges, there is a basement that has an Aleph, a space where all the spaces of the orb meet, that he had discovered it while he was a kid and was necessary to him to finish a novel that he was writing. After hearing these words, Borges feels tempted to go immediately to meet the wonderful object. Once at Darnary's home, the host offers Borges a cup of cognac, invites him to go to the basement and indicates him the position he must adopt in order to behold the Aleph. For a while, Borges suspects that Darnary is planning to kill him, and that his own curiosity led him to the trap, but nothing of this happens. After following the steps given by Darnary in order to see the object, he can finally contemplate the universe in a precise point. The amazed protagonist sees a sphere which center is everywhere and its circumference is nowhere, an object where everything is reflected, where the space has no limits and where the time is all the times fused in a simultaneous reality. He sees several places from different places, he sees the past, the present and the future, and accesses the universe's best hidden secrets. The fantastic contemplation makes the protagonist feel wonder and pity, and only thing he can say to Darnary, who looks for the complicity of his guest, is, "One hell of a." Yes, one hell of a. Borges decides not to talk with his host about the magnificent vision and urges him to make profit of the demolition, taking distance once and for all from the Aleph. Borges decides not to answer the question Darnary makes to him, "Did you see everything really clear, in colors?" The short story ends with a postscript where the protagonist informs that the house was finally demolished in 1943 and therefore the Aleph was destroyed. It also refers to the fate of Darnary as a writer and to two circumstances about the nature of the Aleph, one about its origin and another about the possibility of it being fake. These reflections are based on quotes from some texts of classic and contemporary authors. Another hypothesis about what happened to the object comes when the protagonist tells about the possibility of having seen the object, but also having forgotten about it after that. We can establish an undeniable parallelism between this story and certain parts of works such as Dante's Inferno, as we can compare Beatrice Viterbo to Beatrice Portinari, because it is thanks to her that Borges, as well as Dante, can reach divinity, represented in this case by the Aleph. Something similar happens with Plato's The Republic, where we can compare the descent to the basement to the myth of the cavern, where characters are motionless and watching images that substitute the reality. But these parallelisms, as well as the possible interpretations we can make about this short story from different points of view, literary, philosophical, theological, etc., would make part of a study that exceeds the length of this one, in which I just tried to approach an essential text of the literature of the past century.